everybody, and welcome along to today's Event Industry News podcast. My name's James Dickson, wishing you all a very good morning, afternoon or evening, whenever or wherever you join us from. And in terms of joining us from, I'm always speaking to guests who are joining me from somewhere, but I'm in the luxurious position today where I get to go somewhere. They have let me out of my kitchen. They've allowed me to set up some proper microphones and not just speak into a laptop. And for the purposes of the camera, I'm now going to wave as well. For those of you watching on eventindustrynews.com, we are at the HQ of Universal Live up in Bradford, in West Yorkshire. For those international, followers who may not know exactly where Bradford is, please look it up on a map. Bradford, West Yorkshire. It's the home of quality tea.
Well, yeah.
As I can attest to today, I've been fed with copious amounts of high-quality Yorkshire tea. We've had good conversations about curry already. For those of you in the know, you'll know what I'm talking about.
I've given you a few pointers there, haven't I?
Indeed. Yeah. And there is our first guest on the show today. For regular podcast followers, you'll be familiar with Neil Clappison. Neil is the the commercial manager at Universal Live, and has already been a guest on the podcast a couple of times this year, and is joined to his left and my right by Gaby Watson, the creative graphic designer at Universal Live. Hello to both of you.
Hi there. Thanks for having us.
So yes, thank you again for hosting us today, because we've done all of our podcast recordings from your HQ today, and it's been very kind of you to host us. And the reason that we've got Gaby alongside Neil today is we're going to be talking a little bit about the creative and the sort of the design and the visual side of events, and particularly how a lot of events, I guess, Neil, you'll work with a lot of clients here at Universal Live who perhaps go down the same route year on year. They're running regular events and maybe get caught in a bit of a cycle of doing the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, it normally stems from budget, I think. If you've got a very low budget, then you kind of limiting your options, aren't you? But yeah, people always want something new, something fresh. So it's our job to deliver that. It gets harder and harder all the time, obviously, because you're creating a library behind you of all these shows that you've done. And you don't want to repeat yourself, and you don't want to be copying other people. So you've got to constantly try and come up with something new. And
it's difficult, isn't it? Because you will want to do a show as best as you can possibly do it. You will deliver that and feel that you've done that. Yes, that's as best as... And then, within a matter of days, once that show is packed up and gone, you're then instantly thinking about how can we actually improve upon what we thought was something really good.
Yeah. I mean, it's normally you kind of your high-end jobs where you get a chance to really shine and really do that kind of thing, really push the bar, really do something extraordinary and different. Yeah. And you normally have a much longer design process for that kind of event. Obviously, it's much more important in terms of budget. It's normally a very high-profile event. So you normally have a much longer time to sort of get your ideas together, bandying them around, see what they like, what they don't like. Oftentimes when you haven't got that time or that budget, it's very quick turnaround, and you've got to be really on it to sort of nail it very quickly.
Yeah. And something we were talking about this morning, when I arrived here this morning, we were sat down with a cup of tea and just having a bit of a chat. And Gaby, one thing we were talking about was the sort of the concept phase of an event, and how you will want to try and convey a concept of an idea based on a brief that's come from a client, but you want to obviously do that in a way that shows that you understand what they're wanting.
Absolutely, yeah.
But as a busy company, also that's not perhaps taking up loads and loads of time to create fantastic. And there was something that you were telling me about this morning about creating these sort of more basic concepts as opposed to these sort of really sophisticated 3D drawings.
Well, we started off sending our clients really realistic renders of the designs straight off the bat, and that's just after an initial response to the brief. But then we found out that what a better way of getting on the same page was to send them a sketch. We like using design programs such as Procreate on the iPad, and you can sketch straight onto the iPad and just get something mocked up very loosely, and then you can pass that straight to your client if you've got a good relationship with them, and they can let you know if you're going along the right lines, as opposed to spending hours creating something in Cinema 4D, realistic, photorealistic, and then that's when you you don't really go on a design development point of view. Everyone thinks that's the finished piece.
Sure,
So
yeah.
sketch is like a lovely middle ground of just checking in with your client and checking that you are on the same page for that.
And is it fair to say as well, Neil, that often the people that you're talking to at that stage of a project are people that might not necessarily have or speak the language that you speak when it comes to hardware, when it comes to installation and setup and stuff like this.
Yeah,
so really,
absolutely, yeah.
You don't want to be going down too much of a technical route at that phase.
Definitely not.
You actually run the risk of hindering yourself.
Yeah, definitely not. It's never set in stone at that stage. It's you know, all options are open at that stage. It's more about the look and feel and the design, and are you getting their brief right, and are you on brand, and you know, making sure you've ticked the boxes that they've requested, and then giving them plenty of extras as well, and you know, being original, being creative, showing them something that's really going to wow them. But so we did previously do that, but with a full-blown photorealistic render, which you know is silly doing it at the initial stages when a sketch can just portray what you're getting at, make sure you're on the right lines and pursue it, and it's a very organic way of doing it. I really like it. It just feels right doing it like that.
And Gabby, from a creative point of view, now I'm not a graphic designer. It's not a skill that I have particularly. But does it, using something like the iPad, for example, that seems something that's very tactile. From a creative point of view, is it nice to work in that sort of environment where you have that sort of tactile way of being able to convey an idea?
Yeah, it's great because you can be on the way back from a meeting on the train, and you've got the world at your fingertips. You can just start sketching something out. Even if you're in a meeting with a client, just having that tool there is really great because you start getting stuff down on paper, and as soon as you do a couple of lines, people start to understand, you know, what you're thinking about in your head, and making sure, you know, everyone's aligned with where it's going. And I just think it's a really beautiful tool. I mean, you do have to have a really good relationship with your client, and for them to, you know, some of the bigger clients, you will want to do a more polished render for them and put in those extra hours. But it's a great way of just, you know, cutting that time down and the waste time, and just making sure, you definitely are going the right direction with that.
Your sketches do have to look good as well.
Yeah.
Like someone that can actually draw. If I did it, I can't draw a stick man. So
Well, I said earlier on, if it was left to me, you know, you'd have the napkin with the Stonehenge 7 inches written by the editor, and you'd end up with something that doesn't work.
That being said, we have loads of PMs who say they can't draw, and it's just really refreshing to get a sketch from them, even if it looks like something a child has done. Because, which it generally does a lot of the time, but it's great because you immediately get what they're trying to get at, which is because it's a visual thing.
That's kind of where it came from, wasn't it? Because our PMs are doing that with the design department, and we thought, well, why are we doing this with our clients? And it's just that first step of like sketching
PMs didn't really get it at the start. They were just a bit, you know, like, oh no, I can't draw, it'll be bad. But it just immediately, you know, me and the rest of the design team we know exactly, you know.
Sure, and even in its most basic sense, I guess that if somebody gives you something that you can see what's in their head is better than getting a written brief of, like, you know, I want a postmodern fantasy with you know, trees and waterfalls.
Yeah.
And often this is at the stage where, you know, the technical brief is not particularly important at this point. It's all about getting something that the client is really happy with, that fulfills their brief, that ticks all their boxes, that looks fantastic, that's fresh and new. And then after that, you start, the PMs or the technical director or whoever else will start fleshing it out, and making it real with, you know, working out how to do it.
And the projection side of it.
I mean, when Gabby first started, we kind of told her that we didn't want her to know how these things work, so she had an open mind with regards to design. Yeah. So just design something, and then we'll figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, because a lot of event organisers will have an event. They'll have a sort of blank canvas. I think, right, well, I'll need a PA system there, and I'll need some lights here. They're thinking in terms of hardware, you know, what they need to do it, as opposed to what would they like to achieve as a look and as a concept for their event.
If you start that way around, you find yourself like thinking within the box, and you'll find yourself repeating yourself for no reason. Where if you start at the other end of that and just know that you have to be able, obviously everything, there's got to be a 16:9 screen and there's going to be content on there and slides. People have to see it clearly, that everyone's got a nice view from that. The presenter has to be clearly seen, just little things like that. But if you start from the other end, you can always work those in and make sure your concept fits that.
And I don't know if I've asked you this before, Neil, but does the acquisition of hardware get driven by the creative side of things, or Gaby, do you look at what hardware is now available and how that's improving and think, oh great, I can be a bit more creative with what I'm doing in this element? Or, is there a balance of both? I'm curious to know sort of how that's driven.
Really, it's design driven, I'd say, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, if we can't do it with what we've got, we sub it in. Or we'll get it. Or we'll buy it.
I mean,
either or.
you could take the elements and then think of a creative way of using them, but often I'll be visualising something and then a PM will come back and say, oh, we've got some lights that do that, or have you seen this in the warehouse? And that'll be a good way.
It works both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely both ways.
One of the things that we do with the design team is take them around and show them all of our equipment, all of our lights, so they get an idea of what they can do. So we didn't do that with you, did we? Because we wanted you to be more free thinking. But
and that's genuinely, I find that an interesting way of looking at things, because I know a lot of AV companies, and it's all about the kit that they've got. Here's what we've got available. Here's what we do. And a lot of them would be guilty, perhaps, of not having that creative side of their event design.
Yeah,
and it's perhaps it may be a luxurious position that you're in because you have the means to do so.
I think you're just hindering yourself. If you're restricting yourself to, we have to use what's in the warehouse, then you've already put walls up, haven't you, on your design.
You keep returning to the same places because you've already limited the equipment that you.
Or it's a question of how can we use that in a more creative way.
You're starting off on the back foot.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sure. Many of the people listening to the podcast will be event organisers. There may be people out there who work in a technical production side of things, but there will undoubtedly be a lot of event organisers. Is there a specific way that, as a company, you like to receive an initial brief from somebody? Is there a way that you would say to a client, look, here's the information that we want. If you can get us this, we can then deliver a concept.
Absolutely. It goes so much better if I've got a mood board. If we've worked with agencies and if they send me even one or two pictures of the feel and look that they're trying to go for, then it immediately gets us into a visual place where I'm understanding where they're trying to take it. We could get the theme of forests fantasy, and then just one or two, I can interpret that completely different to how the agency interprets it. But if they send me a couple of references and then we're immediately on the same page.
Sure.
But also things like not all the time we'll have what the event is actually there for. Say a company will book in a conference and they won't even know what the point of the conference is. But that's a really good design driver as well, as knowing what the point of the, is it about, if they're trying to celebrate growth, then that's an excellent starting point for me visually to try and the event's inspired by growth, but
right.
So if their client has already got a solid reason for the event, or something they're trying, a bottom line that they're trying to get over to their either customers or any type of delegate, really, then that's really good for me to start with.
And does the video side of things, I'm trying to think how I'm going to phrase this question. From a content creation point of view, is that something that you will do as well? Do you deliver content for people if they want, video content and
if they do,
animated content?
If they ask for it, yeah.
Yeah, and how can that manifest itself in the initial concept phase? Because presumably a lot of the concept that you've talked about when it comes to designing a visual or a basic piece of artwork to show them is going to be static. So when it comes to, because there's so much more video now in play in live events, isn't there? We've got more sophisticated screens. It's easier to rig. It's easier to put in there. So how would you approach the sort of the video side of things if somebody's got an idea that they would like to have something that moves as opposed to it's just static?
Well, We do content creation, and we're tying that theme into the overall theme of how the set's built, and keeping that visual style across the board is really great. But one thing we do is we started doing is actually putting our designs onto VR goggles.
Right.
And within that you can look around your event space. We can even set it in the venue. We could take the client to the venue. They put the VR goggles on, and our design is there almost in the flesh, already in the space. They can experience it from different angles. We can have the content playing on the screen as they look around it within the VR as well. So,
and if we're doing all the content, it's a real win-win for us, because we retain that artistic control of. We've come up with the concepts for the stage set. We've done the content of the slides, which can keep in keeping with the set, and then in video or After Effects animations, things like that, or video stings that we've made. We're all on the same page, because we've been there. We started it from conception right through to delivery. So it's great when we do get the whole shebang of content creation as well.
yes,
Presumably you have to work though on both sides, so you will work on projects where there is another party responsible for delivering that that show content or that video content that
that's most of the time.
Gabby, you're then not responsible for, but then you're perhaps designing
around that,
a concept of the look and feel of a room or an event that ties in with some of the visual content being delivered by another party.
Yeah, that happens a lot, where the agency will do the content creation, and we have to take visual cues from them, which is really important, because you can't just approach a brief. Two design teams in two different companies approaching the same brief will always come up with something different, and you don't want that to be jarring. So it's great, if the agency has already, got some content that we can draw from, and then we already know that there's some visual elements in there that the client already likes, and then we just take that further and put our own spin on it, and take that, make the set match that, which is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's more or less our mood board, isn't it?
Yeah.
In that respect.
Yeah. Any information is helps us along the way.
Schoolboy error here. I've not muted my laptop, so.
It's not plugged in either. You're not going to run out of juice, are you?
Emails are No, I'm good for juice at the moment. We're 97%.
That's the technician in me. I just saw the plug down there.
We're 97%. For the purposes of the camera, I cleaned up the cabling. For the purposes of the camera.
Oh, they do get dirty, don't they?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you today, particularly Gabby, with you on the show today, is that organisers and event planners, I guess, because events have become so more sophisticated and visually appealing and they look great, they will see something and go, wow, I want that now. They've become perhaps a little bit more savvy in what their understanding is and what they've seen. So do you get people coming and saying, I saw this at this event and I took these photos and this is this and this is what I want?
Yeah.
Are your clients being influenced by what they've seen elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. You get like trends such as the showman theme, which was really big, a couple of months ago after the movies came out, and everyone wanted that. And obviously, as a designer, you're always looking ahead, and even though the events industry is heavily inspired by pop culture, and it's, as a designer, you're always pushing it forward. So the challenge is to take that and then do something new with it, so that you're not throwing out the same stuff. Yeah,
and if you're a bearded lady, then business went through the roof in the last couple of years. Thanks to or if you're a clothing company that's got a lot of top hat and tails in stock, then suddenly your hire business went through the roof. And trends, and it's interesting that you say that, because you get something like that in pop culture. A movie that comes along and visually it's so appealing, and there's so much there to work with that straight away people are going to go, that's going to be the theme.
Issue award shows, that kind of thing, isn't it?
My award show is going to be this. I want a group of dancers dancing to The Greatest Show, and then a guy in a top hat to come along. And I guess going off track a little bit, do you have to keep an eye on the sort of the pop culture thing, music, movies and things, and think, that might be something that crops up in 6 months' time where people are all wanting that?
Yeah, I mean, you do get, we don't, the client will drive the
we're
theme.
more reactive in that sense.
So it's more, you've got to deliver what the client wants, and then do it in a way that thinks it's original and not to be churning out the same stuff. So it's very much we get the trends through what the client would like, and we feed that. But in terms of our own trends, we're constantly looking at different design disciplines and different areas such as architecture and fashion, and art, and bringing those in to create new and exciting stuff, especially with the bigger projects where we've got a bit more money to work with.
And I wonder, are there any circumstances where you will get a client come to you and you actually think that's perhaps a little bit old hat now, or that's a little bit off trend, and you've got to guide them? And dare I say it, I'm thinking Peaky Blinders to me just seems to be. It's being thrashed to death at the moment. There's restaurants.
It's hard when it's a theme like that. It's hard to change the mind because you're just dumping on their idea then, and so you got to be careful about it. I think more with trends such as doing a conference in the round, things like that. That's much more prolific where it gets a bit old hat after a while. So the last 2 years, everyone's been doing that all the time, and you kind of like, they'll say, oh, we want this one in the round, and you go, are you sure? And like, okay, right, fine. And once, but then it's down to us to make that fresh and different and exciting. Think of how we can change that. What can we do different about doing it in the round instead of doing the same old thing that everyone always does? How can we change it? Yeah. And so it's thinking along those lines.
Recently, we've seen a lot of clients they just want the big LED screen. Because it's impressive. Yeah. And I'll be trying to, maybe pushing towards more set design because I know I can do something more interesting and artistic and original with that. But then it gets, it gets pared down to the big LED screen. But we found that it is going to, as people keep seeing, just a big LED screen, it will turn round and set will be the original thing, and people will start moving towards that again.
With the greatest respect to LED, you put it up as a big screen. It's just a much better projector. It's a big screen. It's a cinema. It's a big screen.
If you haven't seen it, you're just like, wow. But then after the 50th conference you've been to, and it just
becomes another big screen. And I guess part of what you do must be conveying to clients what they can achieve with certain things and getting them to think a little bit differently. Okay, you want LED, but great. We can break it down into smaller sections, and we can have different content on different things. We can shape the LED vertically, and we can have stuff running up and down it. There's all sorts of stuff you can do, isn't it, with the hardware now that you couldn't do if you can just break people out of I'm doing that with my hands. That way of thinking.
It's nice because, like we were saying before, with the sketch process, you don't want to spend. You might want to push the client a bit further towards something a bit more ambitious, but you don't want to, waste all the design time that you've got working on something that they didn't ask for. Yeah. So having that quick process is a great way of being like, this is what you asked for, but how about this? And then they go like, ooh, that's really interesting. And think of that. And that's how you get them to come out of their comfort zone a bit. Yeah. And then you meet in a middle ground, whereas, they're happy and, we've done something innovative and original.
Yeah, absolutely.
What how does the process manifest itself if you presented to a client a concept that they go, yes, you've got it. Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what was in my head as a concept. Does it vary dramatically from project to project, or will there be a fairly sort of consistent process by which then you will take that basic concept and then say, right, now here's the next stage,
It depends how accurate they want to. When they say yes, you've got it, and it's just a sketch, then we need to flesh that out to the next stage. Say, right, we'll build that for you properly now in Cinema 4D, do a proper render, make sure it's still the same, make sure you still get that wow factor from them once you do that. At which point we've already started thinking about, right, how we're going to build this, how we're going to do it, and then it's down to the PM then to actually deliver that. And work out how to build it and what they need and all that. So that part is standard process, I'd say.
And design development's really important. Once you take it from the mood board to the sketch and then to the visual, you'll be making design decisions that you wouldn't have had to make at the sketch stage, such as material choice and actually getting it to scale, and does it actually fit in the venue? I mean, you might have sketched something that floats off into the distance, but then you know, how's that going to hang?
Yeah.
Going to start getting a bit more technical. You start talking to your project manager with that.
Yeah.
And
they might everyone might love it, and then the PM looks at it and goes, right,
yeah,
well,
how am I going to do that?
How am I going to hang that? There's no rigging in the room, and then suddenly you got another
You've got
problem.
To be
Yeah, it's like the architect with his fantastic drawing, giving it to the actual builder who's going to build it, and the builder saying, well, it's all right, you've come up with these ideas, but
the
we've
thing
now
is,
got to deliver it.
if you did that the other way around, where the PMs came in and said, right, we've got this room with no rigging in it, right, what are you going to do? Then you've put limitations on the creative process at that point. So you've stymied the whole process, and it's you're stopping it in its tracks when you should be letting that creative flow go first, and then you look at your problems afterwards and say, right, how can we solve that?
Yeah, it's very easy to take a crazy design and pare it down and make it work, whereas it's harder to start with something quite basic and add frills and bring it up to speed.
Yeah.
So we're better off starting with something a bit more ambitious, a bit more abstract or concept driven, and then working out where your lights are going to go.
Yeah.
How's it going to fit in the venue and all that sort of detail.
And something I suppose we shouldn't shy away from is that I'm guessing there would inevitably be times where you present stuff, the client said, yes, fantastic, blah, 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 and then the budget word creeps in and you go, and you say, right, and they love the concept, they love the idea, and then you say, right, well, that's how much it's going to cost then to deliver this as an event, and they go, well, what do we do then? Because I guess that there must be a huge part of the creative
It's just
process
one of the many variables that affects the whole process.
But if your concept is solid, like say it's inspired by water, or if it's for a makeup brand, it's inspired by clarity, you can interpret that in so many different ways, and you can do that for a 20 grand budget or a 200 grand budget.
Yeah.
As long as your reasoning and your design and your concept is solid, I think it's just design development and getting that down to a budget that works.
Sure.
It's definitely hard, but
does it matter? Does it affect you at all, Gabby, in terms of the scale of event as to how creative you can be? So the scale of a 150 person conference, compared to 6,000 people in an arena for an international congress. The sheer scale of it is going to allow you to do maybe things that you can't do in the smaller one, or do you approach it broadly speaking the same?
I mean, I guess with a bigger venue and a bigger budget, you already know that the client's putting a lot of money into this, so it's easier. You sort of feel more inclined to do something a bit more ambitious, a bit more creative. Whereas, down a mid-range sort of project, you don't want to be pushing them too far, because you want to give them something that will work for them and that will actually sign off, and that's really important. So for the bigger projects, it is quite nice to be let loose a bit. And
you also get a bit more time for those as well.
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
To focus on it, make sure it's only research.
Time's an interesting thing to bring up, Neil, because I guess I'm making assumptions here that you'll work with clients, most of the clients are a long way out from a particular event.
Yeah.
And be given...
Sometimes, not always.
Yeah. But well, it's exactly what I'm getting at. Maybe not always, I dare say there have been instances where stuff gets dropped on you. We've got something in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What can
2
you
days.
do? Oh, really?
Well, 3 weeks is a luxury. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the challenge is not necessarily the fast-paced turnaround, because you get that in a lot of industries, but it's the inconsistency of one event you could have 6 months of, and another it can drop on your lap in 2 days, and it's
the frustration, I think, is when the event is in 9 months' time, but the pitch has to be in tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you get that brief, and it's like, right, you've got 18 hours to come up with something incredible for a £500,000 job, and like you're going, what? We need more time for this.
Yeah.
To do it justice, but the event isn't until January of next year,
but often the design that you pitch with won't be even the design that gets, if you win the pitch, you then back to square one, and
completely refined.
Exactly.
So I scrap that now and do something else.
And I guess in that scenario as well, you're having to come up with a creative concept that presumably, if somebody drops it on you that last minute, you might not be able to get to see the venue. It might be a venue that you're not familiar with.
Yeah,
so you
absolutely.
can't do a site visit and go, right, here's what will work and here what you're working
Totally.
almost
Yeah.
blind.
That's happened many times where we are working blind, where we've put forward a proposal and then
It
they've
could be
liked
3
it.
possible venues. You
Yeah.
know, we don't know
And then
even
it's
which
like,
one.
right, how the hell are we going to do this? And we're sort of, working out weight loadings as we do it to make sure we can hang what we want to hang and all things like that, and work,
But design's like solving problems. That's kind of what the job is, solving the problems creatively. So that's just another challenge of how you adapt. With that.
I guess there's never the perfect project, is there? There's never the perfect, perfect
No.
storm of brief, of venue, of everything.
But we try to keep all these things away from that creative process until they need to be in there, because it just, it just gets in the way, doesn't it? It just muddies the waters, which should be clear. So you've got to be creative. You just got to, be allowed to let that creativity flow and not put barriers in the way.
Walt Disney, I love this story. He has for his creative animators that he had 2 rooms. He had one room of dreamers, and they had bean bags and the best food, and they were treated like gods, and it was just their job to come up with concepts and ideas that would be creative and they could be as crazy as possible. And then those ideas we passed over to another room of designers, which were called the spoilers, and they would try and pick away at anything they could and just ruin designs. And then if a design idea came from the dreamers and got through the spoilers, then it went to a team that would actually turn it into something credible. And I think that filter process of just starting out, not being ashamed to throw an idea out there, and then and then thinking about how it's produced, and then that's when the magic happens.
Having somebody who's willing to pick it apart, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah, you do need.
It's normally not a shortage of those kind of people.
I guess so, but having if you can go through that process of diplomatically critiquing an idea or a concept,
Yeah.
and then allowing it to go back to be refined, and then getting through that process, that's a way of maintaining standards as well, isn't it? That's a way of maintaining, the quality of an idea.
It's so important though that isn't in the brainstorm, that initial meet when you meet with designers and the project managers and you're throwing ideas out there. Because if someone suggests something and someone says, well, we can't do that because we haven't got enough, the room doesn't allow for that truss or whatever, they'll throw a thing out there. It'll kill the idea before it's a chance to develop. So it's very important that that sort of stage comes a bit after the creative process.
It's like that brainstorming rule. There's no bad ideas in a brainstorming session.
Yeah. It needs to be a safe place, because once people feel safe, they feel playful, and once they get playful, they get really creative.
Yeah.
And that's where you get the magical ideas.
The only silly question is the one that isn't asked. Someone said to me once, there are no silly questions. The silliest question is the one that you don't ask. Because if you don't ask it, you'll it could be something that's really obvious that everybody else has forgotten about.
Yeah.
And it could be something so silly and so simple, but
Yeah.
simply about how do we do this?
Yeah.
It can. I don't know if you've ever had those instances where somebody asks a question and you get that
changes the
room where
dynamic,
people go. There's that silence for 5 seconds, and you know straight away. Nobody else has thought of that, have they? Right, good. We're on the same page. I'm glad you've asked that, and on you go.
You need that safe space to be able to encourage that sort of thinking.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Yeah. How have you? We've sort of mentioned, broadly speaking, trends, and we spoke about this, theming ideas and things like that. But is there always a trend, generally speaking, that you see a lot of people following, or do we go through phases, or do you go through phases where there is a certain trend, but then there'll be other periods of time where nobody's really doing the same thing for their events?
I think mostly we like to be driven by the brand and the client. So looking at their personality is probably a better way of approaching it than what's the trend at the time.
Yeah.
Like that's the first thing we'll do if we get a brief through, is we look at the client, just even looking at their website, what kind of colours are they using, what kind of imagery, are there any patterns that flow through, and how they've done events before. Is always just good to know how.
Just read their blogs, see what they're all about.
Their brand values, and that's say if you a heritage British car company, you're going to present yourself a lot differently to a grungy makeup brand, and you need to So as soon as you design something that feels like them, they immediately, the client will get on board quickly because, it already feels like part of them and they feel it represents them well. And then if you want to add extra theming or inspiration,
it's amazing,
on top
isn't
of that,
it? With the change in attitude when you nail it, when you get it right, and you send it off to them, and then suddenly you get all this gushing warm feedback, and suddenly from that point on, once they recognise that you understand
them, that's what they want to feel like. You
then they
get
feel
them
safe.
and you're not just churning out something that you would give to another client. Like they want to feel unique, and they want their brand personality to be shown in whatever you design. So,
and one thing that I've become aware of, certainly maybe the last 5-6 years or so, is how subliminally people are aware now of design, where they weren't before. And a large factor of that, in my opinion, is something as simple as your mobile phone every day. If you look at iOS as a Apple operating system on your mobile phone, think about what it looked like on the first iPhone. The bubble, the sort of the shape of it.
That big change that they went
the
through,
soft shape, and then they did that one particular update where it totally reinvented and redesigned what even fonts they were using and stuff like that, and it was huge. So look at how fabulous it is, and that's them being I suppose a trend setter, but also realising that we do develop from a design point of view.
There's a taste for it now.
There's a taste for it.
Definitely.
And I suppose what I'm getting at is that people don't realise that they're aware of it, but they are.
But people are appreciating it now.
If you gave somebody now an original iPhone with the original operating system, they go, oh, that looks antiquated. And I guess some of that now feeds into the business that you guys operate, is that you might not be speaking to people who necessarily understand why they don't like something. They might just say, I just don't like it. And you might say to them, why? Well, I don't really know. I just don't get it.
Yeah, that's why it's really important to have a solid reason behind every design decision, like why you've chosen those colours, why you've chosen that inspiration.
Yeah.
And then you can come back and say, well, we chose this because, we thought it represented your brand in this way. And then if they say, well, I get where you're coming from, but that's not what we want to show, then you've got an extra piece of information to then go back to the drawing board and create something that they do want. But yeah, definitely having decisions behind designs. But yeah, as you say, people are getting more design led, and it's in my job. Everyone's got an opinion, and everyone thinks
it's unenviable.
Everyone's a designer in some respects.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, your job in particular, the end product is what everyone's looking at.
Yeah, and everyone's got
so it has
taste
to
and
be
an opinion
right.
on it. So yeah,
it's got to be designed right. It's got to look amazing, and
But
it's got to
also
answer the brief.
Yeah, you'll find that I could be doing something for a design reason, and someone walks past my screen and goes, "Oh, that looks like. Did you know that looks like this?" And I'll be so my head in it, I won't realise that it's saying something to someone else. But if someone comments, on a piece of design like that, then you can guarantee that in a room full of giant audience of delegates, and everyone else will have if someone's like, that's too pink. Like, that's a bit pink. I might have made a decision to make it that for a reason, but if I've got one person passing comment on it, it's really useful to just gauge how people are going to react to it.
Yeah, I guess you could enter a project and a design that you think is saying one thing to this person or conveying the message that you want it to convey.
Yeah.
And it only takes one person to say, oh, it's also doing that. I guess if you can deliver a concept that says many things to different people in a room, then in some depending on the brief, then you've nailed it in some way. It's a bit like art. People will look at a picture and interpret it in 50 different ways. I don't know whether or not you're ever in a scenario where, I don't know, does an event ever get interpreted? Is there ever an event where an organiser wants their audience to walk in and look at things and interpret it in their own way, like a piece of art?
Yeah, well, we take inspirations that we did a design the other day, which is we're talking about data flow, and we've got these squares of LED like floating across the room, and interconnectivity, and we're using pipes, and those sort of metaphors might not even be noticed at the time.
Sure.
You know, systems, pipes, that sort of thing. But there might be, that interconnectivity. These are all words that we're using and that have informed our design choices, but they might not be. They might be interpreted completely differently to the client at the time.
I really like the non-literal designs. So we had a client that the whole theme of their conference was not to think too far ahead, just to focus on the right now and the next job, but that's it, nothing after that. And so the theme that we all came up with was Tetris, because you only ever see the next piece.
Yeah.
And the whole room was both walls, we had Tetris pieces all down the walls. The stage was made out of Tetris blocks. The LED wall was made out of Tetris shapes.
Yeah.
It was great. It really works. Works.
Yeah, even that can be interpreted as like building up and growth and success, and it's got that feeling of nostalgia and gets everyone out in that playfulness. So even that you can interpret it different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started thinking then for listeners of a particular persuasion of music, Pink Floyd's The Wall, and if you've ever seen that live, the whole concept is that by the end of the show, and I think Roger Waters did it recently, took The Wall out on tour, by the end of the show, this stage is completely covered. You don't see the performers anymore. The wall has effectively been built. That was the concept of it. And, I love those sort of visual ideas where
time,
a progression, you take something like a 3-day congress, it starts as one thing on day one when people walk in, and by the end of that 3 days, in terms of the visual presentation and how things, there's a progression that you could build into something like that, whereas in yesteryear you may have just come in, you turn everything on, and here we go again.
Yeah, something like that is going to keep people engaged and keep the concentration, because it's every day they're walking in and it's different. It's something different. It's grown and it's coming towards this meaningful message at the end of day 3 where it's all complete. And I mean, that's what it's all about. And you know what I mean? It's great little things like that, because what could be worse? Well, not. Let's be real here, but if you're going in for a 3-day conference, potentially you're looking at a boring 3 days there, aren't you? Potentially, whereas if you've done something like that, where you've taken those 3 days as a journey, and on day 1 looks completely different to the end of day 3. Fantastic.
And again, let's take something like that, and I know it's a really specific event scenario, a big conference or a congress or however you want to term it, and it's 3 days, and they might have 7 sessions a day with a big audience. How aware do you like to be of the types of content that are going to be delivered within that conference? Because the organiser may well think, well, that's nothing to do with them and what they're supplying to me, but
we don't really get involved in that, to be quite honest.
I'm just curious whether or not it would have an impact on how you deliver something if you have
what
they're trying to.
If the client led it that way, certainly, because they will have
that would be the ideal situation.
Yeah.
Like if we knew that, we could bolster that up with the design, with the way we set things out, that delegate journey. Like we could definitely, strengthen that message. So if that came to us sooner, but unfortunately, a lot of the times it is, a last minute.
A lot of the times, as you well know, presenters are writing the presentation 5 minutes before they're on stage. So.
Hey, they're making it. You get it 3 weeks in advance, and they turn up 5 minutes before with a USB stick. Yeah. I've ripped it apart. I've changed it.
And most of them don't give 2 hoots about what the set looks like. They just want to get on and do their presentation. It was fair enough.
And it's tricky. And on the podcast recently, I've been talking to people about how to get the most out of your speakers at conferences, how to brief them and get them to put content together that's really relevant. I spoke to another lady who'd run a conference for her own staff who had a really specific theme of let's grow during the whole 2 days. So everything was themed around let's growing, and I guess it those sort of elements in the conference scenario, and forgive me, I know listeners that is a specific example, but if you have got a concept to something like that, and you think, oh no, it's nothing to do with the AV supplier, well actually it could have everything to do with it, because it could. There's so much creativity. Somebody said to you, the theme of our 3-day event is let's grow.
That's perfect. That opens up a world of options, and that's like, I can go away and come up with 10 concepts that are even related to that, and we can really push that forward. But like you said, you wouldn't normally necessarily pass that on.
And we often don't get that kind of I mean, that's a 2-word brief, isn't it? Let's grow.
Yeah, that's
But
all
we
you
often
need.
don't get that, do we?
But
We
that,
often
you
get,
know,
we've got a conference coming up,
yeah,
it's for this brand.
we don't know what the content will be. We don't know what the event's for.
Yeah.
We don't know where it's going to be.
Yeah.
We haven't established a speaker line.
Yeah,
We don't know
We
what
know
our
we want a
key-
conference.
It's
so.
the hardest design brief ever, but you still got to deliver it, and if they don't give you anything, then it's
Yeah,
up
and
to us
that's-
to start fishing and suggest things and see
Yeah,
what they
yeah.
like and what they don't like.
What,
Yeah,
what,
definitely.
what I found is if you have literally no brief, is you need to make yourself a brief. Like,
Yeah.
be the client and just give yourself some boundaries to work around, or else you'll be running around, grasping everything. So if you make some design decisions yourself, like, okay, we're going to design it for this venue, then that sets you off. Or, we're going to we are going to look at the theme of growth or interaction or interconnectivity. Then it gives you something to go on. And even if you pass that along to the client and they go, oh no, that's absolutely opposite of what we were going for, you've got more information for your brief. You know exactly not what not to do. So say if you went down a very techie, I've decided to give myself, looking to the future, technology, that sort of theme. And if you pass that over to the client, they said, oh no, we want to look at our heritage and where the brands come from, then that's some more information that you've got just by, taking that and moving forward with it.
But why didn't you tell us earlier?
Why didn't you tell us last year? You're constantly telling us the trucks are pulling up at the back door, and now you're telling us.
Yeah.
One thing I've not asked yet is have you had experience of utilising, and I'm going to give a specific example here, stuff like the Coldplay wristbands. The RFID wristbands that they gave to people, where they were able to actually integrate something that they could give to the audience as part of the show. And there are also apps now where your app becomes a pixel, essentially. So your phone becomes a pixel.
Yeah.
So you get the event app and then you hold it up in Wembley Stadium and they create a giant screen by using everybody's phone as a pixel.
Oh, right.
There's stuff like that. Have you gone down the route of being able to utilise the sort of the audience element of it in with the AV design of what you're doing?
Kind of. We've pitched quite a few ideas with that kind of stuff. This kind of falls into the realm of the interactive stuff that we do more so. And so we're still at the. I've talked to you about this before, haven't I? About we've built our own sensors and all that. And
Yeah.
So we're just waiting for some of these jobs to come to fruition now.
Yeah.
So we start using some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's exciting that I could, the design team could come up with a concept that's really wild, and we've got people in place, very techie people, that can write these apps or make this happen, or, in a room, we're talking about, showcasing a new headphones that came out. And, how I'd like for you to move around the space and then different installations start reacting to that, or your headphone starts playing different things.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to be surrounded by quite techie people, and then they can make that a reality.
It opens up those designs, isn't it? That, design encompasses everything in an event. So it's not just how it looks; it's how the event, how it interacts with you as you walk. In this particular example, the headphone example, we had 4 or 5 installations in a venue, and as you walked around, each installation knew who was walking towards it and would react accordingly. So it sends information to that person's phone, and because it's a headphone company, they had the headphones in, it starts sending them bespoke audio, things like that. Yeah. And it's all part of that design that we...
I'm fascinated by stuff like that and what is feasible now. And there was a company I was talking to recently, friends of the podcast, Exposure Analytics, and I know that they've got a camera that senses whether it's male or female, whether it's a child, what sort of age range you're falling into, and it can even sense the shape of your face and judge what mood you're in. Is that person engaged? Is that person switched off? Is that person angry or sad or happy or wow? Have they had a wow reaction looking at something? And one of the concepts they were talking to me about utilising that type of camera technology is that they do a lot of work with really sort of big brands on their trade stands at these huge, international trade shows.
Yeah.
And somebody could go up to an interaction zone or a booth or something like that. The camera would sense who they are and all of these things, and straight away display content that's relevant to a female who's looking quite happy, who is, 35 years old. I just think it's amazing that you can have a server there that can instantly work with that type of technology now and change the content that's being delivered. And rather than it being a concept that's been created to satisfy an entire audience of people, we're now in a position where we can actually have several different types of content that could be tailored for different people within any given audience.
And your audience is like really important, and knowing who you're designing for is so important, that have the opportunity to design bespoke for, very specifically. It makes it easier to hit the mark and get that reaction that you want if you absolutely know who the onlooker's going to be.
I'm conscious of time today, because I think we're going to build this as podcast special. Special edition, because we've been having a great chat. I feel it's one of those where it could go on. We could end up like Joe Rogan and doing three hour podcasts. And as I said at the top of the episode, Neil has been a guest on the podcast a couple of times this year already, and I feel that there's all sorts of stuff that we're scratching the surface with, that at some point in the future we will come back and revisit. Our other guests today as well, and forgive me for sort of dodging away from you, Neil. You've been on a couple of times before. We should have brought the hat trick, the hat trick football with you. But a lot of our excellent content has been delivered today, quite rightly, by Gaby Watson, who's a creative graphic designer here at Universal Live, alongside Neil Clappison, commercial manager. And thank you guys again for your hospitality today.
No problem at all.
We've set up the proper microphones. We're speaking to people I am speaking to people face to face now.
It's got to be a luxury
rather than down a video link. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's only 25 minutes drive from my house, so it hasn't taken long to get here at all. So genuinely, thanks guys and they've gone to some effort today. The camera, and I'll wave at the camera, that they put a lovely camera in for us, some extra lighting. They've looked after me with copious amounts of Yorkshire tea in branded mugs. Never miss a branding opportunity. Never miss a branding opportunity. I always ask this at the end. If people want to find out more about you guys, website is I'm throwing that out.
Universal-live.ltd or .com, but LTD is fine.
Type Universal Live, Bradford or Manchester, and you'll find them, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us on the podcast. If you are watching the video of today's podcast via our very fancy camera today, head over to your favourite podcast platform, and you can listen to audio-only versions of all of the podcasts on your commute to and from work, or in between your busy event schedules. Of course, if you're listening to today's podcast, head over to eventindustrynews.com. There are videos of all of the podcasts that we've done, and whilst you're on there, you can also look at some of the special features, news and content that is on Event Industry News. Our thanks once again to Neil and Gaby and all the team at Universal Live for hosting us here today, and we'll see you on the next edition of the podcast. Thanks very much.
Thank
and
you.
Goodbye.
Cheers.
Bye.